who has a default to taking responsibility. You know, like the opposite, I guess, of taking responsibility is becoming a victim, which we talked a little bit about before we started recording. But people don't like taking responsibility. It almost is like holding a mirror up to yourself. It's much easier to go through life blaming the world, blaming the government, blaming circumstance, luck, parents, the guy that did it to me, my ex-boyfriend, my ex-husband. It's a much easier way. It's a much more comfortable way to exist within your mind for most people, for a lot of people. I sat with a guy called Mo Gawdat many years ago, and the first time he came on my podcast, and he told me that when he writes a book, he gets 500 people at random, members of the public, to go into a Google Doc and kind of read through it. And he goes, for some reason, when people got to the section about personal responsibility, about 10% of people just click off because they don't want to read that.
Because nothing's my fault.
They don't want someone to tell them that they can change their life. And I've always found that really bizarre. Like, people don't want to know that some people don't want to know that wherever they are now and where they want to be will largely be based, in most circumstances, not all, be based on what they do now and tomorrow and the day after. There's something about victimhood which both alleviates blame from ourselves and makes us feel justified in our misery.
Do you know, but some people want to live there. It becomes their identity. So I am this. I am how I am today because of this thing that happened to me a long time ago. I remember working with this woman. There was a window during COVID when people were writing to me, and I was like, it's quiet. Let me do consultations. And I did consultation mentors. And I had this one woman come to me, and I would get people like what you're talking about every now and then. Usually when most people came to me, though, they knew what they were getting. But I would have people come to me that just wanted me to validate that somebody else did this to you, or you're okay to feel this way. This one woman came to me. She was a therapist. And she came to me and she told me about some hardships she had when she was young. I think what she had was she grew up with no money. It was very traumatic. She had to take care of her brother. And there was a term for it. I forgot. It was a clinical term. And because of that trauma, today she has all these issues. And so she's like, I have a hard time talking in front of people. I have anxiety. And she was telling me this stuff. I said, why don't we leave what happened to you here? Let's leave it there. I said, and let's look at what we're doing, because you're telling me, Evie, I want to perform in life, but it's like you've just bought yourself this brand new Porsche and you're like, this thing won't go past 50 or 60. Why? Because I'm like, because you have this big ass U-Haul attached to it and it can't. So why don't we leave this back there and we'll move forward? Would you believe, Stephen, she lost her mind? She's like, how dare you? How dare you dismiss what I've been through? How dare you? Read the room. I will never forget her. And the thing was, it was so part of who she was today. It defined her so much. She didn't want to leave it behind. She just wanted to talk about it more. And so sometimes people
Why doesn't she want to leave it behind, do you think?
Because it's her identity. It's who she is. It's like people who have been through something, an experience. I will give you another example. September 11th. So I was in the World Trade Center on September 11th. I survived. I was almost killed. I lost colleagues and friends. But I was also around other people who experienced what I experienced. And different people behave differently. And there were some people that would reach out to me. Remember this one guy, he was a medic. And he saw what I saw. He experienced what I experienced. And he just couldn't recover. And he would call me up. He's like, Evie, I'm struggling. And I tell him, I'm like, I think his name was Jerry. I'm like, Jerry, leave it. It's done. We're here. It's like where we go. And he couldn't. And all he did was talk about it. And the other thing he did is he went to therapy, a lot of it. And I was like, dude, I don't think you should be going to therapy about this. Stop talking about it. I was like, you're reliving it every time. Like therapy is supposed to, it's a Hippocratic oath, do no harm. Like therapy is supposed to help you move forward. But if I went to therapy every week and I talked about 9/11, I'd be a mess. I was like, leave it. Let it be where it is in the past. And what do you do with what we experienced? And how do we move forward? And how do we help other people? And that was a scenario where I was like, if you keep reliving this trauma, you become it. And it was him. He left being a medic. He lost his marriage. He got a divorce. His whole life just fell apart. But do you know, he wanted to stay there. He didn't want to leave it. It was what it defined who he was. I met another dude, I shouldn't say dude, but I met another man who I knew. He was an iron worker, nice guy. He does a lot of stuff around 9/11, but I remember once I interviewed him for a news thing. He didn't know anything about me. This was strictly news as a journalist after I left the Secret Service, and it was a 9/11 piece we were doing. I didn't say anything because, of course, it's not about me. It's about him. And I remember putting his mics on and doing stuff and getting ready to do my video thing with him. He had like 9/11 tattoos all over his arms. And like he had a 9/11 room. He's like, let me show you my room. And again, I said nothing. I remember thinking, I would never tattoo the towers on my arms. I was like, I can't. I'm like, what mental mindset are you going to be in? And he had a room with all his 9/11 stuff. I was like, I have a Valor Award. It's under my bed. My dad had took it, he hung it. Then when he passed away, I took it and I put it away again. It's under my bed. I think that these things, like, there are certain types of people, Stephen, that they want to be tied to this. It's their story. And when they meet you, they're going to tell you about it. Oh, do you know what I've been through? I'm recovering from this. I'm surviving for this. You come across those folks because that's their identity. It's become who they are, and they don't know how to let it go. And it's okay, but that's for them. It's not for me.
What is the harm then of not letting go of our trauma and embodying it and allowing it to become our identity? Like, what does it stop us from doing?
Because I'm not a 9/11 survivor. I'm Evie. That's something I experienced one day in my life. And you're going to tell me that one day defines who I am for the rest of my life? Fuck no.
If it does, what's the harm? Who's Evie going to become?
I'm going to be a mess. I'm going to be afraid to go in a high-rise building. I'm going to be afraid to get onto a plane. 3 weeks after 9/11, I got on a plane. I was like, oh, no. This is not, kill fear while it's still small. This is not going to become a monster. I got my ass on a plane. I was like, I can't control everything in my life, but I can navigate the outcome of my life to some degree, not all. I'm not going to be at the mercy of the world. I can take ownership to some degree, Stephen, but I have to choose to want it. Not everybody wants it, but it's also, I have to, you and I, or whoever, has to have enough intelligence to see that when someone is like that, just leave them. They don't want you to fix their problems. They want to be there. Let them be there. However, if it's someone you're looking to hire or date or hang out with, now you decide, is this someone I want to be around because it is not good for me? Those are two different things.
I want to come back to this 9/11 thing, but it reminded me of a conversation I had with someone recently where they were telling me about all the problems in their life and problems they were having with a particular job that they have. And I remember asking them, I was like, you chose that job, right? And you can leave. And they were so offended by the idea that they had a choice. Like, and they eventually they admitted to me that they could leave and they would be fine because they have enough money, and that they interviewed for that job and went for it, and they also could leave, but they weren't interested in choice. Like, I remember saying to them, like, this is a good friend of mine, I remember saying to them, like, why don't you want power in this situation? Like, why don't you want to be empowered? You're like, I could observe in them that they wanted to be disempowered. They wanted to be powerless. They wanted to be a victim of circumstance. They didn't want to have a conversation about choices and the decisions they could make. They were not interested. And I was like, Jesus Christ, like, what a way to live. What a way to live, to not want to, because objectively bad things happen to people. Traumas, they go through things which were nothing of their doing. They weren't to blame. But it doesn't mean, right, that we can't do something about it. There's a very two different things. Like,
but you have to want it. Some people don't. So I think what you'll do is you'll be able to, people come to you and they'll say, Stephen, I need help or this and that. But you'll be able to see who genuinely really wants to move forward, or who just wants to just tell you about it.
how would you be able to identify the difference?
So people who are, it's called being identity. And I used this word before, but more in a clinical, not in a clinical, but more in the way that I've learned it through training and the research. I also have a master's in forensic psychology. When someone is identity, they use repeated, you'll hear them say I a lot. You can even see this in an email. People who are identity tend to be highly depressed, have a lot of anxiety. They're very self-focused. They're very emotional based. So you can spot these individuals. Now, look, we all visit identity land from time to time. Like, I may go through something difficult and have a moment in this identity space, but then I'm like, okay, I have to recover. But some people stay in this space. It's like their predominant disposition. So repeated use of I this, I that, I feel, I want, I went through. That's one red flag. The other thing is they're very emotional. You'll see there's links to depression. They're typically depressed, but they stay in this space. The other thing is people like this who complain a lot. Do you know that when you relive a trauma or you complain or you have drama, like you get those cortisol hits, you get also adrenaline hits. You get F3, it's your fight, flight, freeze response. We peak. And some people get addicted to that peak. I'm addicted to the trauma. I'm addicted to feeling that. It's like last week I was racing a car. I was at Porsche and I was racing cars for fun. And when you're in the car, you're in the present, right? I'm like, shh, look, trying not to hit the cones, doing whatever. I'm there, I'm in the moment. But like my adrenaline's going up, I'm peaking, I've got my F3s on fire, but I'm focused. I feel alive. So for some people, when they get into this state, when they relive this stuff and they have these spikes, or you see them very high conflict driven or high drama driven, they get these spikes. And it's when they feel in the moment, they feel alive, and you become addicted to it. It also becomes a habit.
I was thinking then about this idea of identity, and what identity also sometimes seems to give people is it gives them a community, and it gives them a sense of belonging, and it gives them purpose, which we're all searching for. Like if I'm a insert trauma, then I instantly have a community of people that, will make me feel like I belong. And then that is something I don't want to give up. If I give up my trauma, I end up giving up my sense of purpose, my community, who I belong to, the way the world understands me. And that's, I guess, another reason why it can be so sticky. Like our traumas can be so sticky. Because we build our whole, our social circle around them. We go to events about it. We're in little social media groups about it.
But I think today, trauma has become like a badge of honor now. In fact, you hear people talking and it's like a competition about who has more trauma. Is it not that? I have more trauma than you. No, I've had it harder than you. Like it's a competition of who's had it the hardest. And it's become like this thing now that we put on a pedestal. I think it's just the new way to draw attention to ourselves and to make ourselves relevant.
It's like ego and status.
It is ego. It is status. And it's interesting, the sense of belonging, in group, out group, that's a whole other psychological thing. If I'm in a group, then I feel like I belong somewhere. It's like how I'm taking it back to crime gangs, or why people join terrorist organizations. They join it because they want to be part of something. It's not because they're bad people. I want to feel like I'm part of a group. And so this makes me feel relevant, which is fine, but to a degree, you also have to have your sovereignty as a person. We want to be part of something because we don't want to be out there and alone out there. But you don't have to be alone out there, but we hitch ourselves to these narratives. And now my identity is I'm a survivor of this. I am someone who's experienced this. It's like, no, those are things that happened to me, but they are not who I am. I'm an evolving thing. I called my book Becoming Bulletproof because I am always becoming. I'm becoming more. I'm evolving. We don't stop. I don't want to stop. I'm never going to get to a point where I know everything. Every day I learn something.